Tom Thibodeau has been relieved of his duties as head coach of the New York Knicks. Sources tell me he led them to 4 playoff appearances in 5 years as head coach. The Knicks believe that they need a new voice.
It feels like I'm making the same video once again, as 3 months ago we made a video exposing one of the biggest coaching disasters in the entire NBA. And Knicks fans weren't exactly excited about my take then. And now it seems like everything I predicted came true, and the New York Knicks seem to agree with me, as we just got word that Tom Thibodeau has been fired by the New York Knicks. And it makes a lot of sense because the numbers I'm about to show you are absolutely insane. We're talking about the most unnecessary overworked starting 5 in NBA history. And I mean that literally. We're talking about a game 1 collapse so bad that it might go down as one of the worst coaching failures in playoff history. Wait until you hear what Kevin Garnett said about the situation. It's actually going to blow your mind. What I'm going to reveal is going to make you realize that this team didn't make it to the conference finals because of Tom Thibodeau. They made it there despite him. And the way they lost to the Indiana Pacers, that's entirely on his stubborn, outdated coaching style that's been destroying championship dreams for over a decade. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to get the latest NBA news to your device. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Download Prize Picks and use my promo code microphone to get a free $50 when you make a deposit of $5 or more. On top of that, I've been hitting more consistently each and every day, primarily because of my brand new partnership with Fantasy Aces. They have the best plays to give you an edge each and every day, and I'm going to leave a link to their Discord server in the description down below as well. And thank you, Prize Picks, for today's sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? During the 2023-24 season, the New York Knicks were literally on the top of the NBA. They were having their best season in ages. It feels like Jalen Brunson finally broke out as a superstar, and it looked like they were going to compete for that oh-so-coveted 3rd ring. However, due to Tom Thibodeau overworking his players all season long, the Knicks became depleted very quickly when it mattered the most. It was literally like we saw a movie last season and the sequel this season. It started on January 27th when Julius Randle would suffer a dislocated shoulder that would end up sidelining him for the rest of the season. To give you an idea of how overworked Randle was, he was averaging 35.4 minutes per game. And this is just one example. Once the playoffs started, it got even worse. In game 1 of the 2nd round against the Pacers, Mitchell Robinson would suffer an ankle injury that would sideline him for the rest of the playoffs. He was only playing 19.2 minutes per game at that point in the playoffs, so it really didn't affect them a lot. But in game 6, Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson would both suffer injuries that would hinder their play for the rest of the game, with Josh Hart even being ruled out of the game completely, and Brunson being unable to finish game 7, ultimately leading to an elimination game later after their 42.2 and 39.8 playoff minutes per game wore them out to a point where their bodies just gave up. Josh Hart played well below his average in game 7, and Jalen Brunson was only able to put up 17 points in 29 minutes. But the worst injury of all was the injury to OG Anunoby in game 2 of the Eastern Conference semifinals in 2024. At that point, OG was averaging a whopping 41.7 minutes per game in the Knicks' 7 playoff games so far. And this was completely out of the ordinary for him because before he was even traded to the Knicks, he was only averaging 33.3 minutes per game as arguably the best player on the Raptors. An almost 9-minute per game jump had him at a vulnerable point, and his body finally broke. In game 2, Anunoby would go down with what looked like a very serious leg injury, and it seemed like he was going to miss the rest of the playoffs, just like Randle and Robinson. But he ended up only missing 4 games after he was rushed back in game 7. New York was on top of Indianapolis 2-0 after OG went down, and in the 4 games that he missed, the Pacers would make it an even 3-3 series, and come game 7, 7, OG would only play 5 minutes after re-aggravating his already bad leg injury, as the Knicks would lose in an absolute blowout, ending their season in heartbreaking fashion. Now, this was an excerpt from my last video on the matter, but I felt like it was very important to give you guys a refresher course here, because you'll see how many similarities there were from last playoffs all the way to this playoffs.
When he shuffled in from the tunnel, the crowd was cheering and the Pacers were going, they're not actually going to play him, are they? And they absolutely attacked him like crazy. But the Pacers were still ahead because they got free looks against him early on and they got their confidence back.
And let's start with the most recent and absolutely devastating example. Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Indiana Pacers. And guys, what I'm about to tell you is just the tip of the iceberg. Let me break down what happened for those who somehow missed this absolute disaster, and trust me, this is nothing compared to the systematic destruction I'm about to reveal. The Knicks had a 17-point lead going into the fourth quarter, 17 points at Madison Square Garden in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. The New York Knicks had a 99.7% win probability with 2 minutes and 51 seconds left in the game when they were up by 14 points. This should have been a statement win that sets the tone for the entire series. Instead, it became one of the most embarrassing collapses in playoff history. Aaron Nesmith, a career 38% three-point shooter, went absolutely nuclear and hit 6 3-pointers in the final 5 minutes of regulation. The guy was shooting like he was Steph Curry. And you know what the crazy part is? According to the NBA's analysis, a 38% shooter should statistically only make 2 out of 6 shots. If Nesmith shoots his normal percentage, the Knicks win this game and take a 1-0 series lead. But here's where it gets even worse, and this is where the real story begins. Tyrese Halliburton hits a buzzer beater that bounces off the rim like a pinball before falling through to send it into overtime. The basketball gods were literally trying to save the Knicks, and they still couldn't get it done, because luckily for the New York Knicks, this wasn't a 3-point game winner. This was a 2-pointer with Tyrese Halliburton's foot on the line. He made the choke signal to the New York Knicks. That should have been all the fuel they needed to take back the lead and win Game 1, but they still couldn't get it done. The Pacers won 138 to 135 in overtime, and just like that, the series was basically over. Now you might be thinking this was just plain bad luck, but this was more of a direct result of Thibodeau's absolutely criminal rotation patterns that left his players gassed when it mattered most. And if you don't believe me, just wait until you see this minutes distribution I'm going to show you to make this Game 1 collapse look like child's play. What I'm about to tell you is so ridiculous that you're going to think I'm making it up. We're talking about numbers that are literally breaking NBA records, and not in a good way. The New York Knicks starting 5 of Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Karl Anthony Towns played more minutes together than almost any other starting 5 in NBA history. ESPN reported that their starting 5 logged 885 minutes together during the regular season, which was 255 more minutes than the next closest team. Let me put that into perspective for you. That's more than 6 extra games worth of minutes than any other starting 5 in the league. 6 games! And we're talking about a regular season where teams are trying to keep their players fresh for the playoffs. But it gets even more insane when you look at individual players, and this is where you'll lose your mind if you're a Knicks fan. According to multiple reports, Mikal Bridges led the entire NBA in total minutes played. Josh Hart was right behind him at number 2. OG Anunoby was in the top 5, Jalen Brunson was 7th, even Karl Anthony Towns, who missed some games, was somehow in the top 20. Are you seeing the pattern here? Think about this. The Knicks had 4 of the 5 most overworked players in the entire league. 4 of 5. That's not a rotation, that's systematic player abuse. And guys, this is setting up perfectly for the injury disaster I'm going to tell you about later. But for now, as one analysis pointed out, the Knicks bench averaged just 11.9 minutes per game, which was dead last in the league and nearly 3 minutes fewer than the team with the second fewest bench minutes. And this is where it gets really good. Kevin Garnett, NBA legend Kevin Garnett, called this out. And what KG said is going to perfectly set up the fourth quarter struggles I'm about to expose. On his podcast with Paul Pierce back in January, KG said this.
It's a data league, bro. Data is probably telling you that, hey, look, the starting 5 playing a way bunch of more minutes than the average starting 5 in your league. So I'm sure he's heard this. Bro's so stuck in his ways that he knows how to win one way, man. My only problem with a lot of the traditional stuff, it doesn't make the download of the latest update. No one's told Tibbs, including the players. If I'm Karl Anthony Towns, a big body, I pull Tibbs in the room and I say, hey, look, this is what we It's a players' league. They can get this off. Tibbs so stubborn though that I don't know, but it's gonna have to be something because you can't go up against the Bostons, the Clevelands, and not have a bench. I don't care who you playing.
Guys, this wasn't just a playoff problem. The red flags were everywhere all season long, screaming that this system was about to implode. And what I'm about to show you is going to make that Game 1 collapse make perfect sense. The Knicks had a negative 4.1 net rating in fourth quarters, which was the 6th worst in the entire NBA. When it came time for crunch time, when games were decided, the New York Knicks were getting absolutely destroyed. But here's the kicker, and this is building up to an absolutely wild stat I'm going to show you later. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Why were the Knicks so bad in the fourth quarter? Because their players were exhausted. When you're playing your starters 37 to 40 minutes a night for an entire season, they're going to hit a wall, and that wall usually comes in the fourth quarter when legs get heavy and shots start falling short. Even Mikal Bridges, who's literally known as an Iron Man and never misses games, had to beg Tom Thibodeau to reduce minutes, saying sometimes it's not fun on the body. You'll want that as a coach, but I also talked to him a little bit knowing that we've got a good enough team where our bench guys can come in and we don't need to play 48 minutes. We've got a lot of good guys on this team that can take away minutes, which helps the defense, helps the offense, helps tired bodies being out there and giving up all these points. It helps just keeping fresh bodies out there. When your own players are begging you to give them rest, maybe it's time to listen. So after that Game 1 devastating loss I told you about earlier, you would think Tibbs would make some adjustments, but he decided to double down and do the exact same rotations that got them in trouble in the first place. It wasn't until Game 3, after the Knicks were down 2-0 in the series, that Thibodeau finally made his first major rotation change. He started Mitchell Robinson instead of Josh Hart, and guess what happened? Knicks would come back from 20 points down to win 106-100. The craziest part was, this was a lineup they had literally never used during the entire regular season. Never! Think about that. Tom Thibodeau was so ridiculously stubborn about his rotations that he refused to try something different until his team was literally on the brink of elimination. And when he finally did make a change, it worked immediately. But wait, it gets even crazier. What I'm about to tell you about the bench players is going to make you realize that Thibodeau had championship pieces sitting right there and refused to use them for an entire season. In Game 3, Tom Thibodeau actually used players like DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet, who had barely played all season long. Wright only got mop-up minutes in one previous playoff game, and Shamet had played sparingly throughout the playoffs. But when Tibbs was forced to use them because of foul trouble, they were incredible. They provided exactly what the team needed: fresh legs, energy, and defensive intensity. And the craziest part was the trio of Wright, Shamet, and Hart had never played a minute together before Game 3, but they posted a 127.8 offensive rating and a net rating of 21.9 in their 9 minutes together. They were absolutely destroying the Pacers when they were on the court together. So what does this tell us? It tells us that Thibodeau had players on his bench who could contribute all season long, but he was too stubborn to use them until he had absolutely no choice. Even furthermore, the New York Knicks starting five had a minus 6.2 net rating in 335 minutes together during the playoffs. The lineup that Tibbs refused to change, the lineup that played more minutes than any five-man unit in NBA history, was actually getting outscored when they were on the court together in the playoffs. This is insane because it's the most used lineup that the Knicks put out, and it's actively hurting your team's chances of winning, and you still refuse to change it. The Knicks ranked just 27th in fourth quarter scoring, despite being among the league's best overall offensively. When the games were on the line, when championships are won and lost, the Knicks couldn't score. Their legs were gone. Their shots were falling short. They were playing like a team that had been running a marathon for 8 months straight. And the craziest part is, Tom Thibodeau has done this before. In Minnesota, his team set a modern NBA record by blowing 22 double-digit leads in one season. That's not bad luck. That's not poor execution. That's fatigue caused by overuse. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out how to exploit this. I mean, the Orlando Magic showed exactly how to exploit Thibodeau's thin rotation. Other teams around the league knew that if they could keep pace with the Knicks for 3 quarters, they could wear them down in the fourth because the starters would be completely gassed. This wasn't some secret strategy. Teams were openly talking about how to beat the Knicks by exploiting their fatigue, and the Pacers took this strategy to another level. They knew that if they could extend the series, if they could make the Knicks play long, grueling games, eventually the exhaustion would catch up. And that's exactly what happened. The Pacers would outscore the Knicks by 74 points in transition throughout throughout the Eastern Conference Finals. And this is what happens when your players' legs are completely gone and they can't get back in transition defense because they've been overworked for 8 months straight. Multiple analysts warned about the injury risk of Tibbs' heavy minutes. They pointed out that for players like Brunson and Anunoby who play physically demanding roles, the toll of heavy minutes can lead to strains and nagging injuries. And guess what happened? Both Towns and Hart appeared to suffer knee injuries during Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals. These are the exact types of injuries that happen when players are overworked and their body can't handle the load anymore. The Knicks tried everything. They even hired a new trainer after their injury-riddled 2023-24 season, bringing in Casey Smith from the Dallas Mavericks. But you can't trainer your way out of overuse. The only solution is managing minutes properly, and that's something Tibbs has never been willing to do. And this is something that we saw during his time in Chicago, where he literally ran Derrick Rose into the ground, during his time with Minnesota, and more recently, his time with the New York Knicks. And that's why the New York Knicks decided enough is enough. That's why they decided to fire Tom Thibodeau. They gave him quite possibly the most talented roster in the NBA. A superstar in Jalen Brunson who took a $100 million+ pay cut so the Knicks could add other stars like Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and trade for Karl Anthony Towns. A team that has more depth than any coach could dream of, and a clear path to the NBA Finals once Jason Tatum tore his Achilles in his series versus the New York Knicks. The Knicks should have represented the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals, but due to coaching mismanagement, they weren't able to do it, and clearly Tom Thibodeau is paying the ultimate price. Let me know if you're a Knicks fan in the comment section down below. What do you think about Tibbs' firing? Do you agree with it, or do you think he should have been given another chance? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.